our special talk today, and it's our president today, who's a very busy person as always, and so are all our committee. But would you welcome Sheila along to the platform? Thank you, Sheila.
Oh. Good morning everybody on Zoom, and good morning all you lovely people here. I'm so happy to see you. That song always gets us going somehow. So we're very cosy this morning in this building. We've just put on the air conditioning, and we're cosy because it's a small group of tried and true people we love to see all the time. So thank you for coming, everybody. Now, strength and challenges. Whoa. Well, we all have them, don't we? Nobody gets off scot-free. And it might be argued that when challenges arise, we are helped to grow in the awareness of the reality and power of consciousness. And that this growth in our understanding of the role of consciousness is an important part of the will of creation. I certainly believe this to be so. If we are observant, we can even see and feel when it is happening, just as we can see when people sink back and regress into former unconscious states. But just to reassure you, this does not mean to imply that God is a person who arranges difficulties on our behalf. Eric Butterworth reassures and reminds us that the will of the infinite for you is changeless and eternal. It seeks ever and only to establish that which is good in your life. And even if you are mistakenly engaged in experiences in the darkness of fear, the divine law of adjustment is with you to lead you through the darkness into the light of new blessings. And isn't that marvellous to know? Let's acknowledge that if we can really believe in the existence of spiritual law, and if we choose to live by this belief, what an immense comfort that can become to us throughout our lives. It's what I sincerely wish for us all. And now we may need more time to believe in this reality. It is important. But many of us already at least are dimly aware that there seems to be some sort of invisible dynamic force that is ever present, and we find it comes into greater focus as we pursue and grow our spiritual understanding. Hooray, hooray. In unity, we come to see that this life force is woven through everything, including us as individuals. For example, if you think about our body, and how it goes to work to heal a cut on our hand without our having to do any work beyond keeping the area clean, you have an example of how this force is constantly working within us. We are an all-important part of life unfolding into conscious demonstration. Basically, we are it. We are the creators of what we see around us, and what we experience in our life comes through us. It comes through the activity of God or spiritual intelligence or universal spirit within us, whatever you like to call it. As individuals and collectively, we are a vital part of this activity of divine intelligence forming itself into expression. We carry this life energy in our bodies and in mental consciousness. And if we are able to allow ourselves to be in communication and harmony with this powerful creative force, we cannot be limited or stuck in adverse circumstances for too long. The reason? Because to them that love God, all things work together for good. And what I think this means is that when bad things happen, if we can have the right outlook and seek divine order, there will be good that can come and will emerge from the experience, and we can rely on this happening. In his book, Life is for Living, Eric Butterworth discusses all this in a lot more length. He says, at any level of experience, life would seem to be an endless series of challenges and difficulties. But like water seeking its own level, there is that in life that works incessantly to resolve conflicts, to heal ills, and to establish peace and fulfillment. He suggests that we call this process the divine law of adjustment. Therefore, because man is a spiritual being, he is forever the focus of a spiritual power that works to manifest life in perfect health and harmony and abundance. And so, it is up to us to make use of our built-in capacity to bring out the best of life in each day's living. That is pretty clear instruction. Overall, what this is saying is that there is a unity of being, and we are part of expression for good, because that is all there is in spirit. We cannot help but be greatly encouraged, because life is eternally biased towards this good. I hope I haven't lost you. Actually, I think I'm preaching probably to the converted. But there are always people who listen later, perhaps to the recordings, who may be new. All of this is both complex and simple and may take some time to absorb. It seems that what the principle of divine life requires is for us to stretch our understanding. It can happen in us naturally as a process, gradually as more and more light of spiritual truth breaks through into our conscious mind, part of the one divine mind. The management of conscious thought is a particularly human responsibility, and one that comes more heightened as we grow. But it is just as important to realise that we have been fully equipped to handle this task as we do become more spiritually aware. And just as we come to know of the limitations of our personal ego over time, if we are diligent and receptive, our growing spiritual awareness turns our attention towards examining our human way of thinking and being in the world. We become seekers after the deeper truth about existence. Questions like who are we and what is this all about become living trails that we may follow or reject according to our disposition and interests. However, if it is God's desire to give us the kingdom, as Jesus said it was and is, then our need is to let God's will be done. For it is the intelligence of God that ever works to inspire each individual to right action. It is the life of God through which the life of man is forever biased on the side of health, healing, and all good things. Butterworth asks, can you imagine how different your life would be right now if you really believed that there was an activity of God within you, working only for your good, for healing, guidance, and justice? Certainly, our attitudes would change, as well as our expectancy of life. And what a difference the idea makes to the whole business of prayer, a whole subject in itself. Where does our true strength really come from? There was a humorous diagram in the newsletter, which, was all about muscles and pumping weight. And so it had a great big heart here. And some of us may pump weights. We know that it's not in our physical strength or our ego strength, which is a good thing, because we do not then need to depend entirely on our human efforts. which as so often appears off track and lacking, and so far has proved ineffectual in terms of establishing our deeper desires for the manifestation of love, world peace, and prosperity for all. Now, if you tuned into the Zoom service last Sunday, you would have heard Reverend Julian Harvey discuss the particular outlook and type of thinking that is essentially different about the unity message. Reverend Julian was right to remind us that unity is not about setting out the details of theological argument and arguing them. The unity philosophy is not designed as a theology. Instead, it was supposed to bypass traditional religious complexities and impediments to understanding the universal wisdom that lies behind the Bible and the liberating message of divine power, innate worth, and personal freedom brought to humanity by Jesus. Unity encourages everyday people to learn how to use spiritual principles in a practical way. The intention of this practical approach is to bring immediate betterment to individual lives and eventually to extend to the expansion of collective consciousness across the planet. Julian's explanation of unity's historical roots was very well received. Nowadays, people are more likely to accept that humanity is on a personal as well as a collective journey towards expanding consciousness. We need to recognise this and take ownership of the profound need to learn how to accelerate the results for all. Reverend Gary Simmons wrote a book, an important book called The Eye of the Storm, in which he asserts that no one is against us. It is a book about peacemaking and conflict resolution, and he tells us that the highest form and expression of strength is non-resistance. Stuart Cardell's talk expanded on this subject earlier in the month when he discussed some of the surprising principles he learned through his study of martial arts. Simmons tackles the idea that force may be might, but it is not real strength. Peace can only be achieved when people realise that they need not see themselves in opposition to one another. Adaptability and flow are even more powerful in meeting other forces and crucial in avoiding conflict escalation. We have a long way to go on this path, and I heartily recommend the insights contained in this book. It seems that the most challenging emotion that undermines strength is fear, explained as false evidence appearing real. When we are in the grip of fear, we find it almost impossible to demonstrate strength, which is in fact found in calmness and stillness. Moments of confusion and dilemma are the most challenging of all. At times, there may be several options present within one situation, all with downsides, but a decision is necessary, so a choice must be made. The challenge is how to make the choice. What do we base this choice upon? I'm going to have a sip of water, if you'll just forgive me. I encountered such an experience recently. It seemed that whichever choice I made, the other two options still remained pressing and valid, and ignoring either seemed to elevate the risk factor. I felt triangulated by the conflicting demands of each and the potential consequences. Fear rose in me about the impossibility of making a right choice. My reasoning process left me floundering, so I knew this was definitely when I needed faith and my inner strength the most. The question was how to apply my unity principles. I knew I had to rely upon divine guidance and spirit in order to move through this experience. And knowing that allowed me to hand it over, sort of, because I won't deny it was a struggle. It was not comfortable at all. Since I could not make a decision myself, I chose to wait and looked for some kind of lead. Then I happened to watch a recent film made in Australia called Buckley's Chance with Bill Nye, and at one point in the script, Bill's character remembered his father's words to him while he was talking to his own troubled and listless grandson. The words he repeated to his grandson were, "There is no strength without struggle." His father believed that was how people developed their inner power and strength. Now, this idea had me look at my difficult experience with a more positive attitude. I found acceptance as opposed to resistance. I could see the choice ahead was not going to be resolved by logic and reason. All the options came with positives and negatives, and I was unable to favour one more than the other. Arriving at this realisation encouraged me to ask, how could I use my difficulty for spiritual growth? I was forced to step out in faith and believe I would come through to my good and that the spiritual intelligence of the universe would help me whichever way I went. I don't think I have ever thrown my faith so deeply on the divine law of adjustment. It was hard to do, and I had to give up my dependence on reason and logic. When we cannot escape and are thrown in on our own inner resources, we must find some way to centre ourselves. These testing periods offer us an opportunity to grow through challenge. Some kind of endurance and maybe suffering is involved, and this serves to get our attention back onto the right track. It is from the challenge of wrestling with different parts of ourselves that we come out of the experience with more self-awareness, knowing where we need to work on any weaknesses that are holding us back, and knowing where we choose to change. I think this is what it means when we affirm that all good things work together for good for those who love God. If we do the inner work and put the principles we learn into practice, that is loving God. And to grow in consciousness is doing creation's will for us, thy will be done. And in doing our part, we activate the infinite creative forces. They can get to work on our behalf to support our actions in ways that we would never even dream of. The law of divine compensation and demonstration. It is really only when spiritual ideas and mindsets become habitual points of reference for us that life becomes much easier and we become more flexible and able to adapt, allowing us to respond more appropriately, reducing our stress levels and enabling outcomes based on our true values. Ironically, after weeks of agony and soul searching and dealing with my fears, I realised I cannot remember all the details of my terrible dilemma. When I gave up thinking I could resolve the problem by reasoning it out, I moved my attention to my trust in the principles. And somehow the difficulty faded, and so have the details that caused me to be so worried. Looking back, I realised that period, requiring endurance and resilience, was not a time of sheer passivity. These periods of when we are forced to confront what we do not want to confront, our own fears, and when we often need to give up some of our most cherished ideas about ourselves and about how life should be, These are times of strenuous change and transformation. I remember reading about one church minister's sadness as he recounted his frustration that so many people only approached him in times of intense personal crisis, when their emotions were so raw and heightened due to extreme pressures of one sort or another. They only turned to him as a last resort, and he knew that. They wanted him to calm their panic and ease their pain, and needed him to help them understand why something had happened and how they should deal with it. People do this, not realising that there must be a process of growth involved, rather than gaining an answer or a quick fix. Often these people in crisis have not taken much notice of spiritual matters before, and so the minister felt he was put in a very difficult position of trying to comfort them at a time when they were least able to focus on the learning. This story stuck in my memory. If we have not prepared the ground, the inner work is much harder to do in times of crisis. This is one of the best arguments I can think of for taking spiritual study more seriously. It pays off in these times of great need, distress, or shock. And knowing the truth principles will give you a starting point, a ground to stand upon to calm and centre yourself, and some basic strength to begin to deal with whatever needs to happen next. We don't think about the power of strength much while we feel confident. It is not until something is disturbed and we are jerked right out of our comfort zone that we may wonder if we have enough strength to cope. When the pandemic hit, I was enormously grateful for my spiritual perspective. I know I did not go through that period as hard as some would have done, and I felt enormous compassion for those without inner spiritual support. I had the unity principles to fall back upon, and I was able to hold the longer-term perspective of this too shall pass, and send my love out to the whole world as it grappled its way through. What can we depend on in times of extreme challenges? Well, it's not our physical muscles, although a level of fitness may be useful. It is not just our personal willpower either, because that is the way of exhaustion and burnout. It is, of course, our underlying beliefs about life and our place in it, and the faith that life is fundamentally good and on our side, and that somehow something will happen to help us all. This idea of something good happening to help us is worth examining further. We can see that this is about trust in the one presence and the one power, God the good, omnipotent, in which we live and move and have our being. Butterworth recommends the following affirmation: I will not be anxious and concerned. I let go and let God work his miracles through me. At these times, we do well to stand still, be still, knowing that no matter what changes or challenges confront us, God is in charge and divine law still holds sway. We are advised to release our hold and let God take over. Let God's miracle of life, of harmony, of protection, of abundance work for you this day. If we think about God and Spirit, this will stabilize and control our attitudes and reactions. And unity puts a lot of emphasis on the value of rest and silence as a mean of restoration and healing. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. All this is to allow the divine activity of love to flow through us. Nobody is immune to the distractions of everyday events or thinking. Butterworth admits to falling into the trap himself, even while writing a talk entitled From Fretting to Letting. He had a jolly good laugh once he realised how tense he was getting about interruptions. He reports, "Of course, the moment I let go, things began to fall into place. All the disturbing problems were resolved quickly, not in every case exactly as I had envisioned and had been willfully seeking to work them out, but in ways that were satisfying and right. It does take a leap of faith and trust and a committed reliance on principle to handle our life situations in this way, but when we do, the results tend to be extraordinary and wonderful. I say this from experience because I have been challenged quite beyond what I have ever imagined I would be and found this to be so. And I will admit to feeling all the anger associated with fear and anxiety at the level of risk that I initially perceived. What is needed is to put aside this fear and practice our principles to the best of our understanding. We must show the universal intelligence we are serious, and then unseen forces will come into play. Spiritual intelligence will guide us through and take charge of our choices, which will turn out to be right. If we rely only on our ego's strength, then we get frightened, or at least I do. Then we can feel inadequate and unequal. These are the times when our deepest yearnings are pitted against our deepest fears, and we need to become a stable observer in order to carefully examine what is going on inside our head. It may be fascinating to look into a whole range of healing modalities for answers, but it is in practicing our spiritual beliefs and ideas where our spiritual strength and growth really occurs. Diversion prevents our listening to the inner Christ speaking to us, giving the guidance that we need. We need to learn to listen more and be in what someone has called divine self-communication, and I like that phrase. Not much more. It might shock some people to learn we do not ourselves produce any of the energy that we access throughout our lives. We are simply conduits for a much larger energetic force that comes through us impersonally from a ceaseless stream that is in constant flow. We are the vehicles for its use and expression. Human beings were meant to create, and we do so constantly through our consciousness, aware or unawares. If we understand how this flow can be called upon by us, we can direct it towards channels of our choice. The energy will always flow of itself in the direction of our thoughts and feelings regardless. And this is an awesome responsibility for us because we cannot stop the creative flow. The underlying spiritual intelligence permeates our being and finds its way to bring about whatever we decree. We must be really vigilant and conscious of this responsibility in order to direct these creative forces into constructive and positive channels. How and why does this work? Well, that is what studying Unity Truth Principles in more depth will teach you. It will teach and encourage you to use the tools that we have constant access to, in the knowledge that the universe will always respond. For those that are new to this type of thinking and understanding, what Unity is saying may sound fantastic and strange and even unbelievable. A cocktail of emotions may be stirred up in you because the idea of living life more easily is startling information. Most of us did not grow up with this kind of training, but it is available to us now if we wish to make the effort to put our lives on a positive and more abundant track. And thank you. That's the end. Could you